Ohio State fans, we have a problem because Ohio State isn't playing good enough to beat the best teams in the country.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Buckeye fans, to your Monday edition of Locked On Buckeyes, your daily Ohio State podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, and Travion Henderson find themselves in today's show, as well as some issues Ohio State is having on the football field because your Buckeyes are not playing good enough to beat elite college football teams. And y'all, that's a problem. And it's not just what we saw against Nebraska on Saturday. Think back to what you saw against Oregon, what you saw against Michigan State, what we saw in the first half against Iowa, what we saw against Marshall. Ohio State has a problem. And we went into the season, Denzel Burke said it during an offseason presser, that this is a natty or bust year. Even went a step further saying you got to win every game. And as a competitor, I'm glad that he went that far to say we got to win every game, because I think if you go into a season thinking, oh, we can have one or two losses and you're cool with that, I will question your level of your competitiveness that you have out there on the field. So I am not mad that Denzel Burke went out there and said that we got to win every game, because that's the mindset I want your leader to have. But when you say natty or bust, you're raising the bar. You're putting that thing extremely high. And then Ohio State every single year is saying, well, we got to beat Michigan. I'm glad you say it. We got to win the conference. I'm glad you say it. Oh, we got to win the natty. That's a level of intensity. That's a level of a standard that is putting your standard lofty, extremely high. And right now, what we saw against Nebraska is just making everybody a little confused and a lot of us concerned, because I'm concerned because Ohio State has time to fix some of their issues, but with some of the injuries on both sides of the ball, I don't know if they're going to be able to, which is a major problem. Because you would expect coming off the bye week, a couple weeks to digest some things after your first loss of the season, and you would expect players to be amped up, to be hyped, to be excited, to get back on the field, to be hungry. As James Laurinaitis said in the school session, hey, we're angry, we're going to play fast. And I'm sitting here thinking, what I heard before the game from one of your coaches, from a college football legend, is not what we saw in the field for all four quarters. Yeah, we saw some fire from the defense at times, and yeah, we saw the defense play fast, and Ryan Day talked about how Cody Simon played possessed, and that's one thing that even Tim May, after the game and the post-game presser, asked Ryan Day if he realized that Cody Simon played possessed, because I think he did play like that. So I'm not mad about like that kind of stuff. We want to see that level of play. What we're getting from the offense at times, really the entire team, but for some reason the offense, specifically in this past game, let's just focus on Nebraska. I don't have time to go back to Oregon and Michigan State, because y'all, we will be here all day. But if we just go back to what happened against Nebraska, it's homecoming. Urban Meyer's in town. You're big noon. Everybody named Mama's watching Ohio State. Way more than normal. The last team to win a national championship in Columbus, Ohio, was there getting recognized. And what did we find? That Ohio State wasn't ready to go, had a slow start. They weren't amped up. They weren't excited. They weren't ready to get back on the field. That's a problem. That's a bigger problem than maybe the fact that they're not playing good enough to beat elite teams. Y'all ain't even ready to play the game. What are we talking about? We're talking about a team that over and over and over and over and over has a problem getting amped up to play. Ohio State has one loss right now, and the luxury about the 12-team playoff is there's a good chance they're still going to make it. There's still a good chance they're going to make the Big Ten championship game, and they got to take care of business and get some help from other teams. Wisconsin losing to Penn State this past Saturday, that helps Ohio State get that shot to make it into the Big Ten championship game. But they're pretty much a lock. If they're 10-2 at the end of the season, they're pretty much a lock to make the playoff. And I think that may have hurt the Buckeyes' level of intensity on Saturday. Because if I'm a young player, 18 to 22, and I know that even on our C day, we could beat Nebraska, you might meld in on a few plays. You might not be ready to go early. You might not actually kick it into high gear until midway through the second quarter. And you may realize, oh, we can't run the ball, but it's cool. We're Ohio State. We're going to win. And you may realize, I might not bring my A game today. And I think what we saw on Saturday, I'm not saying that was a mindset, but we saw a lot of players not bring their A game. If we go into any game and Ohio State is struggling to run the ball, but they nearly have twice as many runs as passes, that's a problem. Will Howard's efficiency was right there. 81% passer on Saturday, 13 to 16, 221 through the air, 3 touchdowns. If you give me that stat line before the game and say, if Will Howard does this, what do you think Ohio State's going to do against Nebraska? Oh, they're going to cruise to a win. 21, 28 points. Like, they're going to cruise to a win. They're going to cover that 25.5-point spread. It didn't happen. That didn't happen. Those were Will Howard's numbers. 13 to 16, 221, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, a 246.7 passer rating. And y'all, that's just stupid. That's just stupid good. I mean, they're just saying that man was getting this job done. But what wasn't getting the job done was, in totality, the fire that Ohio State needed to have, especially when your left tackle isn't there. You may have to go a little bit harder to compensate for his absence. Y'all didn't do that. And that's a problem. We're going to dive into the coaches later in the show and dive into one specific issue with the team later in the show. But my biggest thing is, it's Ohio State. Y'all said now to your bust. Y'all are saying, speaking of the players and the coaches, y'all are saying this is beat Michigan, win the conference, win the Natty. And what we're finding is y'all not playing like that is what y'all might be doing. Because what we saw on Saturday night was, Michigan beat Michigan State, which, I mean, both teams aren't that good. So you would kind of get a nod to the home team. That's what happened. But Michigan's doing some stuff with their defensive line, moving their tackles. Mason Graham, forget the other guy's name. The two big guys in the middle. They're dropping one guy in coverage at times. They are, I believe Mason Graham was bumped out to edge at times. Is that Michigan preparing for Ohio State? Because I believe he was the right end, which is over the left tackle. Now, even though it's going to be slower for the big boy to get to the quarterback, Ohio State's already down 1 left tackle. Excuse me, they're down 2 now. And so we don't know when Zen Michalski's going to come back. If he does come back by the game against Michigan, cool. But what we saw in his first start this year was he is a liability. In the play, excuse me, let's go a little bit further. The coaches didn't help him. The players can only do so much, but the coaches didn't help him. And that's a problem. Because let's just say Michigan was doing that to prepare for Ohio State. Michigan already put that on film. So Ryan Day can't say in the postgame presser, regardless of the win or loss of that game, oh, man, we didn't see that. We didn't know about that. We got to wait to see what was on film because they did some things we didn't expect. And if it's asked, well, this was a little bit different. Did you guys expect that? And he's like, I don't really know. It's already on film. Oh, yeah. A lot of the things we see in college football may not have been on film this year. They have been on film in previous years. And what do you have? So many resources to dig up, to look back at previous years, to figure out what certain coaches do during certain tendencies. And maybe they don't show it in this year. Maybe you got to go back 3 years to look things up. And why do I say that? Because this is college football. You got to make sure you dot every I, cross every T, and make sure everything is done properly to prepare you for the next game. Ohio State's not prepared for games. They're struggling to beat Nebraska on their best day. They're 1 point shy of beating the number 1 team in the country, which makes me think, and I believe, they're not playing good enough to beat the best teams in the country. And y'all, that's a problem. Another problem Ohio State has right now is their run game. And that got exposed Saturday against Nebraska. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it's all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Guys, one thing I like to do is look ahead to Ohio State's lines. Ohio State's currently 3.5-point favorites. Ohio State minus 3.5 versus Penn State. If you want to put some money on some other Ohio State lines, they're plus 400 to win the national championship. They're plus 170 to win the Big Ten. And the over-under for this weekend's game is 47.5. I'm not going to tell you which way to lean, but those are the lines that have Ohio State's name written all over them. All the action goes down in two places, in the FanDuel Sportsbook app and at FanDuel.com. Thank you for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen of the day. I don't like coming on here on a Monday and being negative. I don't. We all want to start our work week off in a great way. Want to be excited. Want to be very, very positive. We all know Monday morning is going to come around, and sometimes you don't get up on the right side of the bed and things just get off to a wacky start. So I didn't want to come on here on a Monday and be negative the entire show. But after what we saw on Saturday, I got no choice but to be real with you. And what we saw on Saturday was a major issue with Ohio State's run game. And that was something we saw early on. But like what I said in the last segment about things being on film, it may not be this year, but it could be previous years. But you got to use your resources to look at the film, all the film, to figure out everything you need to know for the upcoming game. There was some stuff Nebraska put on the film this year, all season long, that showed Ohio State you might want to run other places and right in the middle of Nebraska's defense, because that's where their bread and butter is. That's where they excel. You saw the big boys up there in the middle clogging the holes all game long. And what did Ohio State try to do over and over and over and over and over? Run the ball up the middle. Run the ball between the tackles. Well, I'm not mad at them for trying at all. Well, can we try something else? I mean, we've already seen Ohio State put Emeka Buka in the backfield and do some things with him there. I don't think we saw that this game. We've already seen Ohio State do some motions and do some jet sweeps. I know Jeremiah Smith's first rushing touchdown, maybe his first carry of his career, was a jet sweep that he took to pay dirt. So we've already seen some variation with the run game. But it's a problem when Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson can't even get a little whip, can't even get I don't think it had a run longer than 10 yards. So let's look at this really quickly, just by the numbers. Henderson's longest run was 15 yards. Quinshon Judkins' longest run was 7 yards. Henderson had 2.5 yards a pop. Quinshon Judkins had 2.9 yards a pop. That's not good enough at all. Will Howard, 8 runs for 14 yards. So you're looking at your top 3 guys, and nobody had more than 29 rushing yards total in the game. For a team, Ohio State had 64 rushing yards, 2.1 yards a pop. We talked about it briefly in the postcast on Saturday. If you didn't check that out, go back and check it out. And this is bad. This is bad. Now, I have some numbers here in my notebook that would kind of expose what Indiana was able to do against Nebraska that Ohio State couldn't do. And nobody in the country thinks IU's run game is better than Ohio State's. I think everybody, even to this point, believes on Ohio State's best day, their best day is a better rushing attack than IU's. But it's a problem when the previous week IU could do whatever they wanted to do against Nebraska's defense, and then all of a sudden on Saturday, Ohio State struggled. They were down late, down in the fourth quarter to Nebraska, a team that really wasn't trying to do that much. Ohio State, and there's so many issues with this team, man. And I know my standard's stupid high, but my standard's high because this is a natty or bust year. So I had to raise my own standard about how I look at this team because of how the team was looking at themselves. You can't tell me this is a natty or bust year. Then against that team, Nebraska, that had 215 put on them a week before, the team put up, they gave up 5 rushing touchdowns, and this is your performance? Not only do you have Judkins and Henderson, you also have Seth McLaughlin, who I do believe will get drafted in the NFL. I think Donovan Jackson, even though he's not the best, second best, third best offensive lineman at Ohio State, well, he might be now, more than the third. I don't even know if that's even true. That's up for debate. But Donovan Jackson is probably going to get drafted. Josh Fryer, probably not. Probably undrafted free agent. You got a couple, Taylor Shabola there at right guard. He's not going to get into the NFL right now. But basically, what you're saying is you got guys that are going to get drafted. McLaughlin could be up to win an award at the end of the year. And y'all couldn't overcome one issue. That's a problem. But also, it's a big alarming sound that losing Josh Simmons is way bigger than anybody thought. But also, when it comes to the run game, Coaches. I'm getting ahead of myself. I got to get this out. Why in the world, when you can tell that things aren't going the way you want them to go, does Ohio State's run game nearly double up the amount of passes that you have on the field, have on Saturday? Yeah, that's a head scratcher. I'm literally scratching my head right now. There wasn't a plan for the show, but I mean, it just happened. And it worked out very well. That's literally a problem, because what we're saying is we're going to try to force something that ain't going to work. Excuse me? You're going to try to force your offense to do something that they literally can't do? You got two guys on the outside, number 2 and number 4. Emeka Buka about to get drafted, probably a first-round pick. Jeremiah Smith, if he could come out this year, some people think he could be the first overall pick taken in this year's draft. That's how good he is. So what you're telling me is your dog on the outside that can't nobody stop. We know quarterback, it's just wheeling and dealing and getting things done through the air. Y'all don't want to rely on your dogs on the outside that Nebraska can't stop. Y'all don't want to rely on the guys that ain't getting the job done. Can somebody make that make sense? Maybe somebody is very, very smart. Maybe you're a college football coach or a coach on any level. Hop in the comment section on this video, because I need somebody who is smarter than me to tell me why Ohio State is literally trying to do something that ain't working all game long. But then we got issues because, what was it, 4th and 2, 4th and 1? I believe Ohio State was 1 for 2 on 4th downs. And I believe the one that didn't get right, y'all in shotgun. Y'all are in shotgun in a short yard situation, 3rd and short, 4th and short. And I understand this is a philosophy thing, and this is not my philosophy. I really don't think it. You can hear guys on the broadcast say, why are you in shotgun on 4th and 3rd and short? Why? Just get under center. Your quarterback is 6'4", 235. You know what you can do with a guy who is 6'4", 235? A QB sneak. If it's 3rd and short, and 9 times out of 10, that's a successful call to get 2, 3, maybe 4 yards, do it on 3rd and 2. Because if they stop it on 3rd and 2, what's probably going to happen? It's going to be 4th and 1 or 4th and a half yard to go. What are you going to do? 9 times out of 10, probably 99% of the time, you're going to get that. Why? Because you got a big boy back there that literally all he has to do is find a crack. He can make a crack. Just use his body, hold on to that ball, stick it out a little bit, get past that line and get your body down. It's that simple. But the problem is we got coaches that aren't even making the simple calls, aren't making the simple decisions, and trying to force something that ain't going to work. Now, going forward, when it comes to Ohio State's run game, specifically against Penn State, where Penn State excels in the D-line, is not where Nebraska excels on the D-line. So you might see Ohio State be able to run A-gap, B-gap a little bit more successfully against Penn State than you were able to against Nebraska. But do you trust the coaches to put the offensive line on the field all game long that gives them the best chance to be successful? We saw Zen Michalski have issues on Saturday. You should expect it. Ryan Day chose to allow him to try to work through some of those issues. It's not why he got hurt, but he eventually got hurt. And now you got to work with another fix on the offensive line. Here's my take on the O-line that can help the run game next week. I'm going to close up shop on this topic because I'm getting tired of talking about the run game today. We'll do it about later on in the week because we got to. Because to win big games, what do you have to do? Run the ball. So what we saw earlier this year was Donovan Jackson he was hurt to start the season. Austin Servelt was a starting left guard. Played very well. Was very surprised at how a guy who didn't play last year all of a sudden thrust into a starting role, and he was fine. So we're going to fix the O-line right now. I don't like putting Jackson at left tackle, but if you got to, if Zen Michalski can't go, left tackle Donovan Jackson, left guard Austin Servelt, Seth McLaughlin at center, right guard Tego Shabola, then you got Josh Fryer at right tackle. I don't like that setup at all, but that might be your best 5 right now for Ohio State going forward. Keep in mind, Carson Hinsman is still on the team. And if Ohio State needs to insert him, put Servelt at tackle, switch Jackson and Servelt, cool. But if Hinsman gets inserted because somebody else gets hurt, Hinsman has shown he can get the job done. on the offensive line at Ohio State. He wasn't the best a year ago, but he got the job done. So Ohio State has more options on the O-line than maybe they think. My hope is that Luke Montgomery is not the choice. You got to put Austin Servold in and then consider Carson Hinsman, because I have a hard time believing he has fallen that far down the depth chart. He has fallen down, but y'all, he can still get the job done on the Buckeyes O-line. Someone that is not getting the job done right now, it's a group. It's the coaches at Ohio State, because some of them continue to just wet the bed and fail during big moments during the game. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. One thing we know about Ohio State coming up, they're going to be playing at Wrigley Field, one of the best baseball stadiums in the country, and some of you might be trying to make a last-minute decision, checking various apps to trying to figure out where can we go to get tickets to the game. Go to Game Time. Y'all, they got all-in prices. You can get a panoramic view from your seat. They got that lowest price guarantee, and they also have the Game Time ticket coverage, which allows your purchase to be covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Game Time also allows you to take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Thank y'all for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen every day. I told y'all, it's a Monday. We all want to be positive, but after a win like that, and after seeing Ryan Day's demeanor during the post-game presser, I got to be real right now, and I want to be real every day. Ohio State's coaches aren't getting the job done. Some of them are. Some of them are not. But when you're getting it done sometimes and not getting it done all the time, we got to talk about it. We talked about some of the issues offensively earlier about situational play calling and why in the world on 3rd and 9 are you running a bubble screen or a tunnel screen to Travion Henderson, which turns into a 7 or 8 yard loss. Like, these are things that just shouldn't happen. It's very, very stupid. Now, maybe, and in the moment, maybe he was trying to pass the ball. But once again, go forward. The name of the game with moving the football is to go forward. 3rd and 9, move the ball straight north and south. This east-west nonsense is what has confused Ohio State fans for the past few years under Ryan Day. It hasn't been as bad with those plays to the outside because Carnell Tate caught a quick screen and got 6, 7, 8 yards. So it's not consistently, but it's a problem. It's a major problem. Is it a Ryan Day problem? I think there's some issue with Ryan Day because his teams are having issues in some of these big-time games. Or, wait, Nebraska not a big-time game? Wait, they're not an elite team in the country. They weren't even ranked. What did we find? In this game specifically reminded me about the Northwestern game a couple years ago. You remember back in Evanston, Illinois, Stroud was a quarterback. They were playing with 40 to 55 mile per hour winds, and it was so hard to move the ball, and the elements were insane, like stuff you don't normally see. I cover high school football locally, and there was a game earlier this year. There were some massive, like 30, 40 mile per hour winds. I think it was up to 50 mile per hour. It was pretty bad. It was pretty insane. The second half of the game, it rained the entire time. Normally during games, I am down to the sidelines, roaming back and forth, trying to get videos and just do some live tweeting and things like that. And one thing I saw during that day was, man, this is insane. Like, those type of weather games, bad weather games, you remember those moments. You remember those games. Remember where you were. Remember the fact that this is the second time in a couple years that there have been games where I've covered games at that specific school where I've had to go up to the press box in the second half because the rain's been too bad. And that's what happened a couple times. But that game in Evanston, Illinois, a couple years ago, it was weird. The weather was crazy. What was also weird, why am I going back to the first segment? Because this is a deja vu moment. That day against Northwestern, Ohio State's team went out there. They were not motivated to play. They acted like they didn't want to be there. And no, this is not something I talk to people about, Literally, I saw with my own 2 eyes numerous Buckeye players just going through the motions. Evan Hall was Northwestern's running back. Ended up playing, I think he got drafted by the Colts. I don't know if he's still in the NFL, but he was a guy that got to the league. I didn't think Evan Hall was an NFL running back at all. No, he was good. He was solid. Like, he wasn't one of the elite backs in the Big Ten. Definitely wasn't in the country, but he made some solid plays that day. And Northwestern tried to do some things differently to confuse Ohio State, and they definitely did some stuff that day. What I'm confused about is the stuff we're talking about here with some Ryan Day coach teams and the coach is not getting the job done. This is a sense of deja vu because this has happened over and over and over and over again. Chip Kelly got hired by Ohio State, left UCLA to come to Columbus to be the OC, took a pay cut, and everyone's like, oh, man, this is a great marriage. And I was one. I still believe it. It's a great pairing. Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, they're very tight. They trust each other. Cool. Chip Kelly struggles with situational play calling. And I don't know if this is Ryan Day's influence or Chip Kelly just doing things on his own. I have no idea. But what we have seen is sometimes on 3rd and short or 4th and short, the stuff that you would think, man, this is easy. Just make it happen. It's not getting done. The stuff where I think, like Saturday, I'm just by the numbers. I didn't mention this in the last segment, but I'm going to do it here in a second. Where Ohio State's run game isn't getting it done, you should not nearly double up the amount of passes versus runs. The amount of runs versus passes because, you got to make sure you can run the ball. When you can't do it, lean on the 2 guys on the outside. Lean on Jeremiah Smith. Lean on Emeka Buka. Lean on them 2 guys. Lean on Carnell Tate. You'll be fine. You would have covered the spread of 25.5 because if you just ride your guys that's getting the job done, Nebraska can't stop them. No, we'll have to push, pull down on shoulder pads, but they couldn't get the job done. Here's another issue. It's a big picture issue. A week ago, IU had 33 rushes for 215 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground against Nebraska. A couple weeks ago, A week ago, just Saturday, Ohio State had 31 carries, 64 rushing yards, and 0 rushing touchdowns. So, yes, it's on the players. But at some point, Chip Kelly, you got to realize, like, even if you're not getting the job done in that game, change. But also, why aren't you prepared for what Nebraska is doing? Because all Nebraska's trying to do was just muddy up the game, slow it down, utilize it, get Ohio State off the field quickly. And then once the offense was out there for Nebraska, long, drawn-out play, like you're trying to use all the play clock. Why? To keep the Buckeyes offense off the field. I mean, the game plan nearly worked to perfection. They almost won the game. But Chip Kelly, man, you got to figure this stuff out. And Jim Knowles and Larry Johnson, James Laurinaitis, Matt Guerrieri and Tim Walton don't really get a lot of negative talk, but some of the rotations are still kind of questionable. The Rushman package, I don't know if it's Jim Knowles or Larry Johnson or Ryan Day. I don't know who puts that together. But specifically with that one, if you're going to bring in Kenyatta Jackson Jr. and Caden Curry for your Rushman package, and they are the smaller guys compared to Tuimoloau and Sawyer, why are you putting them 2 dudes on the inside? And you got Sawyer and JT on the outside. Wouldn't it make more sense to put Sawyer at one end, Sawyer at one D tackle spot, JT at the other, and they put Kenyatta Jackson Jr. at one end spot and Caden Curry at the other? Absolutely. But the coaches, for some odd reason, keep doing the same old stuff, singing the same old song and dance, and getting the same old result. Insanity? It might fit the definition. That's all I got to say. Thank you all for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Guys, Craig Sheeman is the guy that puts the Big Ten first when everyone else overlooks it. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. Send every email to jstevens317@gmail.com. Buckeye fans, it's Penn State week. And if you can't tell, I am nervous about this game. Maybe my tune will change over the next few days. Not sure, though, because the way Ohio State's playing right now, they're not playing good enough to beat Penn State on Saturday in Happy Valley.